Yeah, you said
Right?
you said it worked out. Wait, I'll do it after class.
Funniest video ever.
Where's the cat?
Yeah,
I hung up that one, like, that was sad. I tried, but
Two victims.
I told Dr. O'Hanlon about how we do this. She started dying laughing. I said, she comes around and we all go dead silent, and then whoever gets it, we all go. And she started dying. She got it. Why are you laughing like that?
This video says don't look away.
Yeah, it was myself.
What's next?
Go plug it in the speakers.
We play a small
One video.
It's
Emmanuel. Emmanuel.
Emmanuel's like, at this point, I just expect
Emmanuel,
it.
stop Emmanuel.
Emmanuel, they should get you a laminated one at this point. To read,
Yeah, the
stay the paper.
Was that
It could be like an expo marker.
Alrighty.
That's plenty. I have 12 bags of candy in my laundry.
Actually, also.
It's gonna be a bad idea. I don't want to show it. I'll like Okay, then this is perfect for me.
We're recording.
You don't like cats, this is perfect.
They're trying to save the cow. It's actually small, it's a lot.
It's a lot of stories.
The cat's like 20 stories up. The cat's
so long. What country is this?
Oh, another one.
Oh, that
Dayton, stop watching cat persecution videos. Okay, producer surplus and the supply curve. The price is $25. Jack's producer surplus is $15 because his cost is 10 and the gap between the cost and the price is where producer surplus falls. So what's Janet's producer surplus going to be? 5 is correct. So what's total producer surplus?
Do you add the two for
Sometimes the obvious answer is the right answer.
So the producer surplus is the area, right? Not just the
Correct. So where consumer surplus is from the demand curve down to the price, producer surplus is from the supply curve up to the price. So if we got this straightforward enough, you guys are just squirrely today.
I'm just ready to get
All right. So this should look a little familiar. Our price is $40. At a price of $30, the marginal seller will supply 15,000 shoes, so her producer surplus is $10. So the entire producer surplus is the area above the curve, below the price.
Is that like consumer surplus per every shoe sold?
No, this is total. This is total.
So your revenue is at $10.
Per shoe.
This is the same per shoe.
Yeah, but it's by the thousands. And so geometry again, and our producer surplus is gonna be 25.
Why are you subtracting 15? In your equation.
To find the height of the triangle.
Where'd you get 15?
That's the,
Where the supply curve meets the side.
The y-axis.
Oh, okay.
So the height of the triangle is 25. The length of the triangle is 25. Half of that. Producer surplus. 312, 50 times 1,000. Right? Okay. So if we decrease price, producer surplus decreases. Price falls to 30. We now have a new producer surplus. Got it? 2 reasons for that fall in producer surplus. This is exactly the same as we did with demand. These people in this triangle leave the market. These people, this producer surplus is just lost due to the lower price. Okay? That's all it is. Should be very concrete, very straightforward here. Are we all on board so far? Because we're about to put them together
Yes.
after we practice.
Practice.
Here you wanted more practice yesterday, here you go.
You gotta say it.
Practice time!
Yeah.
40-year reunion, you guys bring me back in the wheelchair. Say it, Hope, say it.
Why'd you lose all your teeth?
Old age.
I probably will lose the will to floss after like 80. All right. So, marginal seller's cost at a quantity of 10. The marginal seller's cost is? So we're going to find total producer surplus for $20. So total producer surplus at $20 is that triangle, right? Price goes up to $30. Where's our producer surplus? It's that whole big triangle. So we pick up this rectangle and that little triangle, new people entering the market, and increase producer surplus due to the increase in price. Now, the producer surplus on the additional units is 25. On the additional price is 100, so our producer surplus goes up to 2.25. All right. Gavin, did you know your dad was going to check up on you yesterday?
Honestly,
How painful was that?
I mean, he yelled at me, but I was like, you know what, Dad, they've all been on at me for it. I didn't turn it for the night twins. I'll take it.
It's 10% a day.
It's like, at least it's not. They're turned in now. I just turned it in.
Okay, consumer surplus is the value of the buyers minus the amount paid by the buyers. Right? What you're willing to pay minus what you do pay. It's your total gain from participating in the market. Now, what would your consumer surplus be if you were willing to pay but didn't buy? The whole amount that you were willing to pay. This is why, and I don't want to be too stereotypical, but it works this way, guys. When your wife comes home someday and says, look at everything I got, and you're like, oh my gosh, how much did that cost you? And she answers by telling you how much she saved by shopping on sale and using a coupon or something. Do not be deceived. Inform her that you took econ in high school and that you understand that the consumer surplus could have been maximized had she not shopped at all.
Don't tell your wife that.
Not if you want to have to wife.
That's
That's exactly it.
Bro,
All right.
Decorate our home.
So the producer surplus is the amount the sellers get minus what it costs them to produce it. So the difference then is their gain from participating in the market. So total surplus is the two of those things added together. Total surplus is our total gain from trading in a market. What do you mean?
Like in your slides, it just has like blanks.
Because you're supposed to follow along and fill in some of the information on your own.
Oh.
I just don't like it because if I follow along and you go too fast, then I can't do that.
But you can look back because I'm.
Or you just hit those before you get to the shower.
Yeah.
That just seems
Jared.
Because you could totally fill this in for breeding.
We're in class.
Oh.
Andrew
Oh
just
yeah, I
beat.
noticed that.
What?
With your vaping in class and Jerry Mr. Polina.
class. Is a huge spot.
All right.
Hey, but can I at least see a picture?
Come on. Save it for the home.
Save it for the home.
Okay. Little theory here. Read it, and then I'll interpret for you. Essentially what this is saying is every buyer and every seller make their own independent decisions. And all blocked together, all of those independent decisions create the market. The difference here is from a market economy to, say, a command economy, where the government is telling the sellers what to produce and leaving only those options available to the buyers. Versus maybe a socialist style economy where collectively what is to be produced and consumed is determined. Okay? So our market economy is theoretically the most efficient because everybody's making their own decisions in their own
way.
And urinal flies, self-interest. Okay, so our question then, and the whole reason we look at total surplus is this actually the best allocation? Is this the most desirable? You always want to maximize total surplus. The bigger the total surplus, the better the economy is, the more efficient it is, the better off everyone is. Anytime you're diminishing total surplus, bad. Okay? Remember that. Diminishing total surplus, bad. Bad. So, total surplus measures efficiency. The more efficient market makes everyone better off. Thus, we believe we're maximizing well-being. Okay. As economists, we're interested in efficiency. When you mix public policy in, then you begin to be concerned about equality. But we as economists, we don't care about equality, we just want efficiency. Okay. A little utilitarian, or anti-utilitarian. Okay. All right. So, we know we're efficient if we have the greatest possible total surplus. Efficiency means the people who want the stuff the most are the ones who get it. And the producers who are most able to produce the good at the lowest cost, which means they have what kind of advantage? Comparative advantage, are the ones who are producing it. Okay? If we were a paper airplane factory, right, that's what this class functioned as. We function as paper airplane manufacturers. And Caleb, put your hands up, Caleb. Is part of our workforce, are we going to maximize our total surplus?
No.
No. Comparative advantage has been lost right here with the broken boy. Thank you.
Fired, yeah.
Yeah. Well, to maximize our total surplus, we would in fact have to fire Caleb. But because we live in a society governed by policymakers who are also concerned about equality, we have to hire somebody to assist Caleb in his job because we cannot discriminate based upon his disability.
So you have to pay two people to do less work than if you just fired.
Or we have to find a different job, but since all we do is manufacture airplanes, paper airplanes, maybe we give Caleb a different job and he's responsible for handing out the paper to all of the work locations.
You have to put them all the flyers.
Question, Sean.
So what would it be like if they weren't concerned about quality?
If they weren't concerned about equality, Ho could be out on his ear. We'd pink slip him, he's fired.
So
We
like,
might even bring in the president.
what's a more like drastic thing? Like, is this saying that we hired him while he was fine and then he got hurt?
Yeah,
while-
he got himself hurt. So think back, have any of you ever had to read The Jungle by Upton Sinclair? Okay, it's about life in the 1800s. It's an immigrant family, and one of the things that it explains is it was such unskilled labor in the factories and in this instance the meat processing plants. There was no sick leave, there was no protected employment, no unions. If you didn't show up, there was a line of people at the gate willing to work for low wages in the terrible conditions just to have the wage. So if you were sick, you found a way to go to work. You found a way. If someone in your family was in the hospital, they were in the hospital alone because everybody else was at work. There was no taking off to have a mental health day. None of that. Okay? You wouldn't have been in school in that day and age because it was about efficiency and it was about competition because there were plenty of people who wanted to supply their labor and not enough jobs for them all to work. Hey, do you have a question?
What if we just gave Gil the leave of absence?
Oh, well, that would be something that is possible under our policymakers' policies, but as economists, we hate that. So it's terribly inefficient. That's terribly inefficient. Well, even if it's an unpaid leave of absence, it means we're holding a job available for him. We could be employing somebody who's gonna be productive in the meantime. Oh, what if we bring in a part-time employee and their comparative advantage, their opportunity cost is even lower than Caleb's? But because policy tells us we gave him a paid leave, when he's healthy and his hand is stitched up, he can come back, and we have to displace the person who was actually more efficient and more productive than he was.
Is that the economy we're living
Yeah.
in?
Yes, we live in a market economy regulated by policymakers who force inefficiencies upon us because we as a society value equality, we value protections for our workers.
Screw equality.
Because it's incredibly stone-hearted to say,
I know.
through no fault of your own, your hand was broken. Right? He was holding the door open for some lady, and the door got pushed up against the wall, and it crushed his fingers. And he was just trying to be polite. It was after work, no fault of his own. His hand's crushed. He loses his job, loses his house, loses his car. Right? So we as a society have said, in essence, efficiency to a point, but we're still people and we care about other people, so we want to prevent those kinds of things from happening. All right, yes. Yes. Please don't run though. You may mosey, no meandering, no lollygagging.
Briskly walk. That's what John
On your
does.
hands, walk on your
All right. So, changing the quantity of the good will not change the total surplus. Changing the quantity of the good will not change the total surplus. Because if you change the quantity, you're increasing one and decreasing the other. Change the total surplus.
Wait a second, so when you give us a graph, we just go like the smallest number and calculate and we get.
We'll see.
Yes.
Sweet.
Thinking ahead.
All right. So, what do we know about market equilibrium?
Market clearing.
It's the market clearing price, and we assume that at the point at which the market will clear, that means that it is efficient.
Yeah.
It's inefficient to have stuff left on the shelves. We love market clearing price because it's efficient. So at market clearing price, our total surplus should be maximized. All right. Market equilibrium is $30. Our quantity is 15,000. So our consumer surplus, 15 times 15, right? Which is, Dayton?
225.
225. Producer surplus is 15 times 7.5.
Wait.
$112.50.
Hmm?
$112.50.
112.50. So our total surplus is 337.50. I stink at math in my head. So is that equilibrium efficient? You can't answer it based on this. You don't have enough information yet. In theory, you think it's efficient because the total surplus covers all of the area between the two curves. So let's look at a little bit of information. Every buyer whose willingness to pay is greater than or equal to $30 is going to buy. Okay? Every buyer whose willingness to pay is less than $30 won't buy. So, are the consumers efficient? Yeah. We're meeting their willingness to pay. They get what they wanted. So the buyers who value the good the most, those who value it at $30 or more, are the ones who get it. So we're good so far. Okay? Every seller whose cost is less than or equal to $30 is going to produce that good. And these folks are in theory willing to produce it, but we know that above $30 they're not producing it. So the sellers with the lowest costs are the ones who produce the good. Yes?
Why would sellers produce it if it was $30, if their cost was $30? Because then,
So no profit is what you're saying? Why would you ever produce something at no profit?
if you get,
In the real world, you would produce at no profit. Sometimes you'll even go ahead and produce at a loss.
because I know you can get like sales going, so you get
Right.
an extra
Or there's other
other
reasons.
stuff.
So, for instance, Jared, one of your customers, an older couple, the husband died. Turns out he didn't have any life insurance, and the old lady living in the house is like, I can't pay you this month, Sonny. Calls you Sonny. I just can't pay you this month, Sonny, until the Social Security check starts coming in. Do you mow her lawn?
Me personally, I probably
Why?
party. No.
Because you're not
You're right. I'm all like, I wouldn't.
You're doing it at a loss. Why would you do it?
because you have a heart.
Goodwill. The neighbors are going to see you out there, and they're probably going to know the situation. For kids, know you're doing that. Maybe they'll hire you to do their lawn next month. There's other intrinsic reasons why sometimes you do
A
things
lot of
at a loss.
businesses do it for like PR too, to get into the community, get their name out.
And sometimes it's also a short-term situation. You know that this is short-term. And it's going to snow. She's going to need you to clear her driveway, or she can't get to the doctor to get her arthritis treatments. Depends upon the good. We're gonna get to government subsidies and the impact on total surplus. We'll also get to taxation and the impact on total surplus, and we're going to get to perhaps the greatest WWE wrestler name ever, dead weight loss. It's an economic term, but I think it would be an amazing
It's Stone Cold Steve Austin.
CWL in the ring. Dead weight loss, the undefeated economic champion of the world.
It's Stone Cold. Stone Cold. Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Stone Cold would be utterly defeated by dead weight loss. I wish I had just an echo effect that I could.
Lost.
Dead weight loss. All right. So, does equilibrium quantity maximize our total surplus? Let's check by examining what happens to total surplus at a different quantity. Yes. Okay. So, at an equilibrium quantity of 20, our consumers value it at 20. Our suppliers value it at 35. Logan, did you just say ruh-roh? Thank you. Dayton, give him a scoop snack. So look, we can apparently increase our total surplus by reducing our quantity from 20 to 15. So does equilibrium quantity maximize total surplus? Yes.
So you just change the quantity of the surplus.
Well, No, we changed the quantity to get to equilibrium. I'm showing you that equilibrium maximizes surplus because at a price outside of the equilibrium, surplus is diminished. Well, you still have a surplus, but you
But not
don't.
as much.
Okay. All right. So let's look at a lower quantity. So here, we're not producing as much as consumers would demand, right? And so we're losing all of this total surplus there. Or we're losing that total surplus right there. All right. This will make more sense in actual practice. Bottom line, equilibrium equals maximized total surplus. Equilibrium is always going to give you maximized total surplus as long as there's no interference in the market. As long as there's no subsidies or taxation or foreign trade. As long as it's just a pure market economy, it's all that's going on. Equilibrium equals great total surplus. Say again?
So that never actually.
Yes, this is fantasy land.
That's where I live.
That's where it's broken.
All right, Adam Smith. You've heard of Adam Smith before, right?
What just happened?
I don't know.
I couldn't hold it in. He's ever in fantasy land. He
One.
goes,
2, 3,
that's where I live. I said that's where his girlfriend lives too.
10.
Oh, snap. I'm so sorry. I like didn't even think about it, it just came out.
6.
Tap out! Tap out! WWE this side of the ring.
Wait. Look.
We have
The
issues.
coldest WWE right now is Hannah Bailey.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
Adam Smith. You've heard of him?
Yeah.
Man has almost constant occasion for the help of his brethren, and it is vain for him to expect it from their benevolence only. In common English, we always need help from our fellow man, but we ain't gonna get it if we expect them to just give it. He's saying you gotta pay for what you get.
Well, then how does that work?
He will be more likely to prevail if he can interest their self-love in his favor and show them that it is for their own advantage to do for him what he requires of them. So what he's saying is, people are always really, really self-interested, and you have to show them why it actually benefits them to do something that also benefits you.
Don't.
If not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we
I would not help you with anything this year.
it is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. Meaning the butcher doesn't slaughter cattle just to feed himself and his family. The baker doesn't just bake enough bread to feed himself and his family. They bake more, they slaughter more, they prepare more so that they can sell it. And why do they sell it? To benefit themselves. So if you're willing to pay for what you need from someone else, it is in their self-interest to provide it. Yep. Every individual neither intends to promote the public interest nor knows how much he is promoting it. The common man walking down the street has no idea what an integral part in the overall web of economic activity that individual is. If he did, it might overwhelm him, probably wouldn't change the course of action. But every individual is integral to it. If Caleb gets fired because of his broken hand, he can no longer feed himself, clothe himself, house himself, and drops out of society. Society has now lost his labor, lost his rent, lost his consumption in the marketplace. And that's a loss for society as a whole. It's efficient, but it's still a loss. Okay? He intends only his own gain, and he is in this, as in many other cases, led by an invisible hand to promote an end which was no part of his intention. You don't go out intending to make the proprietor of a store better off. You go out intending to fill your belly when you go to the restaurant. You don't intend to, go out thinking, oh, I'm going to tip this waitress so much that it's going to make her kids Christmas, and I'm going to get the manager a bonus because of my consumption at this restaurant, and I'm going to make sure that Texas Roadhouse has a record profit year. But your action in going to fill your belly and eat some of those rolls that are probably filled with crack.
Don't even start. I'm kidding.
And by that I do not mean that they are illegal in any way. I mean simply that they are so good they're addictive. You are helping others in so doing. Nor is it always the worse for the society that was no part of it. By pursuing his own interest, he frequently promotes that of the society more effectually than when he really intends to promote it. So what Adam Smith is saying is that by just going about your ordinary life and acting in your own self-interest, you're doing more for society than when you think you're deliberately acting to benefit society. How accurate all of that is in every instance? Probably not. There's no common law that governs every situation. But there's a reason that in 2017 we're still talking about Adam Smith.
BYU.
That's the most average.
Scottish. Alright. Market equilibrium is efficient. No other outcome maximizes total surplus as much as market equilibrium. Everything else messes it up. Market equilibrium equals maximum total surplus. Guaranteed that if you remember nothing but that, you get at least one question right on the quiz.
Yes.
Perfect.
And you'll get at least 1 point on the AP exam.
Yes. That's just something I want.
The government cannot raise total surplus by changing allocation. It cannot. Government involvement only diminishes total surplus. Right now in this market economy, we have to assume that by sleeping, Wes is maximizing his total surplus. And that were I to wake him up, I would disturb his equilibrium and thus decrease his total surplus and destroy his efficiency.
Wes, go back to sleep.
Wes, you're
She just told you to go to sleep.
All right. Laissez-faire. Laissez-faire. Allow them to do is the literal French interpretation. It's most often interpreted as hands off, meaning don't interfere or don't get involved. Not a recommended parenting method, by the way.
It's not.
It's like those one where we found where they talked about where
The baby in the swing,
Yeah.
that was laissez-faire parenting.
What happened?
Where in Iowa they found a 4-month-old with maggots because they hadn't bathed him or changed him or fed him in a week. So, yeah. Those parents ought to be going to jail for a long time. That's laissez-faire parenting. Not good. All right. Laissez-faire is basically an economic term saying keep the government out of business.
Did they just forget?
Had a baby.
Wait, laissez-faire is, the government should not.
Interfere with the business. Interfere with the market. Yes, sir.
If we still use laissez-faire like this day and age, would we like still be like the industrial revolution pretty much?
No.
No. Society would do it.
So let's look at the real world right now and talk about what things aren't laissez-faire. NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, saying no tariffs, no trade regulations, no controls on trade between North American countries. We're in the process of getting rid of it.
Why? Sorry.
And the because President Trump wants to get rid of it. He doesn't like it. He wants to renegotiate trade agreements. He thinks that free trade is unfair trade to the United States.
Except for everyone's better off in trade.
Everyone is better off in trade.
So
But he
if we
doesn't
start
like
charging-
that goods produced in Mexico are cheaper, and so we buy more of them because consumers are acting in their own self-interest. So he wants to abolish the free trade, to regulate the trade, to force American consumers to pay higher prices for American-made goods, or to tax the Mexican imports so that we pay higher prices for Mexican goods. Rather than looking at the base cause of the problem, why are Mexican goods more or less expensive?
Because
Cheap labor.
Fewer environmental regulations, fewer labor regulations, fewer insurance regulations, blah, 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 blah. But are we as a society about to get rid of those regulations?
No.
We have interfered with the market in numerous ways.
So
Can we unwind all of that? Probably not. Do we want to? Do you want to live in a world that is still industrial revolution dirty?
Yes.
See, this is where you can study economics in its pure form, but economics doesn't exist without policy. Efficiency doesn't exist without equality. Okay, protect. It would never be in industry's best interest to self-regulate itself. Okay, free market versus central planning. Suppose resources are allocated by the market, not by the market, but by a central planner who is concerned about society's well-being. So we're not going to let the businesses and the consumers decide what they want to produce and what they want to consume. We're going to tell them what is going to be provided because it's better for them. So guess what?
yes.
No more ice cream, no more soda, no more of those fatty goods that are giving you all the beaties and the cancer.
Sound like Michelle.
So, in order to allocate things efficiently and maximize surplus, the planner would need to know every seller's cost and every buyer's willingness to pay. And is that possible or practical?
No.
No. Okay? So, that's why centrally planned economies aren't ever very efficient. They aren't ever very efficient. A centrally planned economy might assign to the Hoke household a productivity of 50 paper airplanes a day. They don't care that their opportunity cost is way, 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 way high. No, the Caleb Hoke household. They might not care at all that Nick's household can't even get his hands on paper, and yet his quota is 50 airplanes a day. They don't have paper there. You still got to meet that quota. So what happens is society is short a whole bunch of airplanes. Paper airplanes, yeah. But that's a major trade good in our society.
Yeah.
So.
In our free market.
All right. So in the end, markets are a good way to organize economic activity. We want perfectly competitive, or we looked at this using only perfectly competitive markets, because the minute we start looking at other kinds of markets, you're in much higher level economics, and we start having to implement calculus. And when nobody wants that. So, we're going to, in our next chapter, look at failure to allocate efficiency and its impact upon total surplus, etc., etc. So tomorrow, you must do your end of chapter problems. We'll go over them, quizzes, Thursday.